At least I'm tired.
Okay, everyone, thank you so much for being here for Kathryn's senior exit report. What we ask our scholars to do before they go off into the big wild world is look back on their 4 years and reflect about things they've accomplished, their growth, and then share with us what's next for them and impart maybe a little wisdom that they've gained along the way. So for our seniors, we have a full hour, so that's a great privilege. So we've asked the students to keep their presentation to roughly 20 to 30 minutes so that we have lots of time for discussion. So once Kathryn completes her formal part of the presentation, then what we'll do is open things up for folks to make comments. I'll have comments first, and then we'll ask our faculty and staff that are in the room to offer their thoughts, folks that are online, and then the other folks in the room. So without further ado, Kathryn.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to go ahead and get right into it. So if you don't know me, I'm Kathryn. I am a senior majoring in global affairs, and I'm doing a double minor in psychology and intelligence and security studies. So I'm going to go ahead and just go chronologically through all of my years and then end with a little bit of reflection and lessons learned. So this is me in my dorm my freshman year in Alvarez, way back when. So these are the major events that happened pre-COVID. So I was able to go to 2 Model UN conferences. The first being here at UTSA, I represented South Africa in the Security Council. It was my first conference ever. I was absolutely terrified, but I ended up being able to come back with the most improved delegate, and it started my love and passion for Model UN that I've tried to carry with me ever since. I also got to go to another conference in Houston in the spring semester, and there's my delegation. We all represented Poland. I was again in the Security Council. If you can't tell, I like security. And we got our first Distinguished Delegation Award. In the fall semester, I was also able to go to DC for the very first time with the World Affairs Council of America's National Conference. In that picture, that's me with the former Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, which was kind of very surreal. I got to meet and to discuss a lot of things with former Secretary of Defenses, Secretary of States, a lot of really important people. And that also sparked my joy for being in DC, being able to talk about these really high level issues. And it was honestly very surreal that as a freshman, this was in November, so only a couple months into college, I was able to go to an event, and I was like, okay, I can do a lot of things. And then in the spring, I went to my first student conference on national affairs at A&M, and this is a policymaking conference, and you have different roundtables where you discuss different issues, and then you develop and present a policy proposal. So ours was limiting the influence of monopolies, and it was a really amazing time for me to also get a look into how policies develop, because it's very different from UN resolutions. And so that's something that I dipped my toes into my freshman year. And these are just some of the highlights. As you can tell, I became very good friends with my friend Madeline Morales, and she got me, that's her text message to me, telling me to get in the gym with her. That is a friendship that we've maintained ever since. And I'm super grateful for that. And then obviously this is all pre-COVID, and then COVID hits, and we go back home. And before COVID started, that summer I was supposed to travel with my family, and then I was like, I have nothing to do now. And so then I applied to a bunch of internships really last minute that I had no idea how to apply to internships either, and so I didn't get any. And so instead, I did a summer internship with my local Chick-fil-A that I worked with in high school, and I was able to create it with them. And it was about leadership. So I created new leadership structure. I monitored team growth and developed more accountability with our leaders. And this was really difficult for me because I also as an intern, I would also just work as a regular team member, but I was also still holding our managers accountable to our standards. So it was really weird to be have a meeting with them and be hey, you need to be doing this better. And then 30 minutes later clocking in and then telling me what to do. It made me have to be super confident in what I was doing and being able to balance, the respect, but also holding them accountable at the same time. Also, I don't have any pictures for it, but during that summer, I was also English as a second language conversation partner with the International Relations Office of San Antonio virtually. And that was really awesome because I got to meet weekly with people that were learning English. And I just talked with them. And there's people from Iraq, India, and Colombia and Mexico. And just being able to have discussions with all of them about their cultures and their different backgrounds and their experiences in America and their struggles with learning the language was super eye-opening to me, and I really love that. My sophomore year, this is the era of room 5.203, probably one of my favorite years ever, plus money, especially. And so this is the year I really dived into doing a bunch of competitions and challenges. So the first one was the Schumann Challenge. And this is a really difficult challenge. There's a bunch of like Ivy Leagues that do it. And here I am with former top scholar Taylor Helmkamp and her friend Ari. And we worked with Dr. Stefanova on this. And we developed a proposal on countering China in the Arctic, and we presented it. And I probably did very poorly, but it was really interesting because it was the first time I really was starting to learn about China, which is now one of my focuses that I study in. And it was the first time that I had to create and defend a proposal like this, because they you present it and then they interrogate you, which is terrifying. I went back to the Student Conference on National Affairs, and I actually won this time. We won Best Policy Proposal on reforming the WHO. We discussed reforming their financial contributions so that they can make more sustainable policy decisions. And then I also went back to Texas Model UN. I represented the US on the Security Council, which is a terrifying position because you have a veto power, and you have to know what you're talking about because everyone expects you to be a leader in that. So we talked about the responsibility to protect and peacekeeping conduct, and we again came back with the Distinguished Delegation Award. The leadership, this is the year that I started to do leadership in Model UN. So in the fall, I was Undersecretary of Logistics, and then in the spring, I transitioned to being the Secretary General, which is the president for those of you who don't know. And part of that, I chaired the Human Rights Council with Taylor Helmkamp and my other Secretary General, Julia Bowen, which was really cool. And then I also moderated a spring panel on China, which was, again, terrifying because we had a heckler at one point that I had to address and tone down. And the guy on the left, he's an esteemed former diplomat to China, and the heckler was heckling him. So that was scary, but I had to learn how to deal with difficult things like that. And then I began serving as vice president for GIA after Grace begged me to. But I ended up really loving it and working with General Schaefer in that organization. And I began running the social media and making all of these fun graphics thanks to Canva and none of my own ability, and helping organize speakers. And it was I really love this part because I got to network and connect with a lot of intelligence professionals, and it really helped develop my love, my desire, and my knowledge of the intelligence field. In the fall of my sophomore year, I was also the first campus director for the Millennium Fellowship at UTSA. And so through this, I helped organize the application process. And then I also led several sessions where I discussed with our fellows how to effectively do social impact that actually has a benign influence instead of an inadvertent negative impact. And then I also discussed the Sustainable Development Goals. And then I developed my own mental health training program that was developed in theory, but I never actually implemented it, unfortunately, because it's really difficult. But I did learn a lot about being a leader. And then also the main thing I took away from this was how to effectively volunteer and create these projects. Even if you don't get to do anything with them all the time, being able to understand the impact that they can have was super important. In the spring, I also did alternative break. This was different than what you usually have for a alternative break. It was all online, it was virtual. Every week, we had different meetings on homelessness and youth development. And we talked about things like gentrification and intersectionality, mental health, and then we had one or two services. But I really love this because I love being able to learn more about the topic and understand it instead of just, doing a service event and that's it. You're done, you never touch the topic. I actually got to learn a lot more about the details and the different ways that we could address it. And these are some fun memories. As you can see, it was me, Madeline, Ricky, Kaylee, all the time, a lot. And this was probably my favorite year of my undergrad career, just because I was able to develop really strong relationships and be surrounded by really powerful women that could inspire me. And I'm friends with all of them to this day. And so that summer was a really big step for me. So I got a security and counterintelligence internship with the Department of Defense. And so I was in Maryland, in the DC area, and I was able to develop and brief senior leaders on a threat assessment regarding counterintelligence vulnerabilities for a critical agency program. And I had to learn a lot about cloud infrastructure. And if you know me, I'm not a STEM girly. I can barely do basic math. And so having to learn about cloud infrastructure was super difficult for me. And being able to, I didn't have to just understand cloud infrastructure, but then I had to understand the risks associated with it. But I absolutely loved having to do that, I had talked to some of the smartest people that I've ever met about cloud infrastructure, and then take that and apply it to what I knew and the reports I was seeing, and then create a risk assessment. was really difficult, but honestly really rewarding because I realized that it's kind of a skill that I have, being able to discuss things that I'm not familiar with, but then find the middle ground to where it's relevant to like intelligence, is a skill that I didn't realize that I had, and through this I did. I also got to travel a lot, and I made a lot of really good friends that I'm still friends with to this day. That picture of us in front of the Washington Monument, I think all of us are going full time. So friendships that have lasted to this day, it's really awesome. And so this is my junior year. Again, I did a lot of competitions and conferences. So this top left one, that's one of the ones I'm the most proud of. It's the WMGIC NATO Act competition, where basically we developed and presented a NATO proposal for countering disinformation, and we actually won, which meant that we got some money, and we actually got published. So this is my only publication at the moment. We're published by NATO basically, which is a really cool line to drop. I like saying that. I also went back to SCONA again, and that's me and Julia going. I dragged her along with me this time, and I developed a policy proposal on countering China in space. And at this point, I had a lot of conferences and competitions under my belt. I thought I knew everything, but I came in, we were talking about China, and I was like, oh, like there's all these things we can talk about. And this one girl was like, what about space? And I was like, what? I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean space? And it was very humbling, because I was like, as much as I knew, there's still so much that I didn't know, and I got to learn a lot throughout that conference. And it's something that, like, in General Schaefer's class the other night, I touched on this topic because now I know a lot about it. And we got honorable mention, which is basically second place for our policy proposal, which is cool. I went back to Texman yet again, and this time I was Tunisia in the Security Council. We talked about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and like nuclear disarmament, and once again I got distinguished delegation, which is cool. And then finally, we did Cyber 912, which is where we basically had to develop a policy response for the National Security Council on a cyber attack on critical infrastructure in Qatar. And going in, like, we had just come off of our WMGIC win, and we were like, oh, we got it. Like, easy money, like we can do this. I was working with Grace and Dylan, who are cyber heads, and so I was like, you know, dream team right here. We're gonna do great. And then we presented, and it was a very difficult process to develop it. But then when we presented, they kind of like tore it apart afterwards, and we were like, oh, I didn't even think about that. So again, another humbling experience. And then whenever we like looked at the winner proposals, we were like, oh, so that's how you do that. Like, and like, it was just like, even whenever you're at your best, you can always improve. So stay humble, guys. I also got the opportunity in the spring to go to the National Model UN conference, which there's like 2,000 people at that. It's an international conference, people from all over the world. So I was the head delegate for the UTSA delegation. There was 8 of us. We represented Barbados in 6 councils. I was on a General Assembly first committee, which was my first time being outside of the Security Council for Model UN. So it was a challenge, because in the Security Council, there's 15 members. It's a small group making decisions. If you're P5, you get veto power. So it's a very different like mode of negotiation. Here in GA1, every single country is represented. And so there's like hundreds of countries, right? And so you have to find a way to make your voice heard and get what you want in the resolutions done in such a big group. So it was a huge learning experience. We talked about IEDs and nuclear safety. One of the resolutions I worked really hard on for IEDs got passed, which was really cool. And then probably the coolest opportunity was we got to meet the permanent representative of Barbados to the UN and the staff. And we got to have like one-on-one conversations with them before we represented Barbados, and be like, well, is this what Barbados would do? And it was really interesting, because what I didn't expect to learn is, so there's 3 people on the UN staff for Barbados, only 3. For the US, there's like a lot more, but Barbados is a very small country. And since they only have such a small staff, like they can't know everything. They have to like, we asked them, we're like, oh, well, why hasn't Barbados like passed this resolution or like passed this treaty? And they're like, I don't know. They're like, we'd have to do research on that. And so it just gives you insight about like how like logistical constraints and things like that can impact negotiation on an international level. And it was just something I never considered. So it really deepened my understanding of international politics. More Model UN things. I also was a chair for the Security Council in the fall on cyber warfare and water-related conflicts. And part of this, whenever you're a chair, you have to develop background guides. So it's basically giving everyone all the information on the topic and guiding what you want them to discuss in their council. And so I learned a lot about cyber warfare and how like water and lack of water can lead to a lot of conflicts, which was super interesting, and I love that. And then we had a social at the end, which was really cool. And then I continued my service as Secretary General. That picture is of us doing a little trivia night, which was really fun. And I also continued leadership in GIA. We don't take pictures of anything. We have no evidence besides our Instagram that we exist. So that's fun though. These are some other fun things that I did that semester. So there is us at the ranch. I remember Christy was like, "Why are you so calm?" whenever people were like throwing me through the air. It was a fun time though. And then there's us serving at Good Sam, which was the day of service that Madeline orchestrated for everyone. And that was a really awesome opportunity to lead a service project. There's the Top Ballers volleyball team, which is the first all top scholar intramural team that we had. We got second place with like 1 win. I don't know how we managed that. There was like a couple ties, a couple forfeit, but we did it. And then these are just some fun moments with friends when I turned 21 so that we could start having our regular wine nights and things like that. It was a really good year. That summer, I returned yet again to DC for another internship with the Department of Defense. This time I was doing intelligence analysis, which is what I want to do. So it was a really awesome opportunity. So I worked on counterterrorism and transnational organized crime threats, and I produced reports on incoming threats based off of what information we were gathering. And then I also got the opportunity to discuss with multiple intelligence agencies throughout the intelligence community about like their intelligence needs. A lot of this was me just observing, but it was really cool to see how different agencies work together. And this was really awesome because, again, a lot of the analysis I was doing was very technical, and that's not my background, but I really loved how it pushed me out of my comfort zone and made me realize that, like, even though I am just a little humanities major, I can still do STEMmy things, despite what everyone says. And then these are just some more fun times that I had that moment. Yeah. And then my senior year, this year I did some really cool experiences. This picture, that's me at the Gwangbokjeong, I think, palace, if I'm remembering the name correctly, and I'm wearing hangul, which is the traditional Korean dress. And it was a really cool opportunity to get to experience Korean culture, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a second. And being able to wear the traditional dress with the approval of Korea, don't worry. But it was a really awesome learning experience. It's really difficult to talk about 4 months of your life. I mean, like Tejas was saying in the previous presentation, when it's something so big, it's really hard to condense. These are some of my favorite moments. Korean barbecue, I miss it. The one on the right, that's tteokbokki. Before it was made, it was super spicy though, and I realized that spicy foods make me dizzy sometimes. That was a cool realization for me. On the top left, it's literally just egg bread, and it is delicious. It is so good. That one was really cool. So I went to Korea University when I was in Korea for 4 months, and that is us at the Korea Yonsei Games, which Yonsei is their biggest rival. It's like this historic rivalry, and they have these games where they play like hockey, soccer, football, baseball, and basically whoever wins the most games wins the whole thing. And then there's like a big party afterwards on the streets and everything. And then there's these cheerleaders up in the front who are doing like backflips, backbends, you do headbanging, like cheers. It was a really fun time. Really awesome and unique experience. Next to that, there is that's in Busan. It's one of the only like Buddhist temples that's actually like on like the water, at least in Korea. And it was probably one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. It was very surreal. And the next to that is Chongchong. That's where we went for like a little retreat over the weekend with some of the international students. Some other things that I learned while I was studying abroad. So on the left, I list my classes. So I took 2 classes in Korean, a class on the American Empire, international politics in Northeast Asia. And my favorite was, it's called Diplomacy Colloquium. And every week we would have a different former government official of Korea or a different diplomat for Korea come in and speak. And so in this picture I took a picture with the former Korean diplomat to Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and some other places. And so being able to hear firsthand from actual diplomats, like how diplomacy works for Korea, who is very different from the US, like they're like a middle power country. And so the power that they're able to leverage in like international relations is very different. And so it really helped me understand things from not just like a US perspective, but from a Korean perspective, what they're looking for and how they address those things, which is the biggest thing I wanted to get out of my study abroad, was to be able to understand things in international relations and just in general from a non-US perspective, because you can't understand developments in the world just from one perspective. You have to understand how other people are seeing it and observing it and how they react. So that was a really cool opportunity. I also was part of a language exchange program. That's Hailin. She was awesome. She was very fluent in English, even though she didn't think she was. I was not very fluent in Korean, so she was more of help to me than I was to her. But it was really cool because we got to like exchanged a lot about not just our language but our culture, and being able to, she like took me to like different food places and stuff, and then she told me about her life in Korea, and so that was really awesome. These are some of my favorite foods. On the top, that's kimbap, and it's delicious. It's very yummy. On the bottom left, that's shabu shabu, which is technically a Japanese dish. It means Swiss fish. It's like boiling water, and then you steam a bunch of stuff. So in that, we had like beef, mushrooms, green stuff, and bean sprouts. But it was that was like one of our favorite places, because after you're done with all like the soupy stuff, they like pour the rest out, and then they make, without cleaning it, they make fried rice in the bowl with all like the leftover like stuff. And it is, I don't know what they did, but it was the most tasty fried rice I've ever had in my life. I miss it every day. It was a favorite place to go to. And then on the bottom right hand corner is dumpling ramen. And this was at a place called Kathryn Wilson. And it's this super cheap, like that was like $2 maybe. And it was delicious. It was amazing. And everything there was, we called it the green grass place because they had like fake green grass in front for some reason. But it was just like this really cheap traditional Korean food, and I miss Korean food a lot. And then I also made a lot of amazing friends. They have a lot of photo booths there, so I have a ton of those pictures. But the girls on, all of these people I'm still friends with, but especially the girls on the left one. The one on the left, Emily, she goes to A&M. I was actually like celebrated her 22nd birthday with her. Like she's from San Antonio, funnily enough, so we still see each other a lot. Then Lexi on the right, she's gonna be moving to LA, and we're already planning like our reunions and stuff. So it's really awesome. Oh, and here's a little QR code. So I made a blog about my time in Korea. So if you would like to read more or see more pictures, because I couldn't fit it all on here, here's a QR code. I saw one filling out, no more. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so this spring when I returned, I took 2 honors courses, one in humanity, migration and borders, and another one in the global with Dr. Hofferberg, and I learned a lot. So one of the things I learned is the role of art and advocacy. I learned this a lot in my borders class, and the role of how art can speak to like your deeper innate sense of humanity way more than like sometimes words can, and that was really powerful. In both classes, I learned a lot about exploring things through an interdisciplinary lens, and so in my humanity borders migrations class, we looked at things from both a scientific and a humanities lens, which was like really interesting because I usually think of it as like either or, but we looked at like evolution and genetics at the same time as looking at like philosophy and art, and finding a way to meld those together to create like a wider story was really awesome. And then also in my global class, we looked at things from like an economics perspective, from sociology, from like typical politics. So it pushed me outside of my comfort zone to kind of try to wrap my head around how other disciplines look at the same issues that I'm considering. And then also challenging an instrumentalist use of information. So I'm the type of person typically where I look at information, I'm like, okay, what can I do with it? Like, what does this mean? How can I apply this to the real world? But in like typical humanities, like sometimes it's good to just think about things and discuss things for the sake of talking about them. And that's something that I was never good at. I walked into my classes the first day with Professor Santos, and I was like, I'm really bad at philosophy. I'm really bad at art. Like I am not good at like finding a deeper meaning from it. And I was like, this class is gonna be difficult for me. I'm just letting you know. And it was a challenge, but I was able to develop just like a wider understanding of things like that. And I was like, oh, I can do it. Like I just wasn't trying hard enough before, so that was cool. I continued my work with Model UN this semester. So I was gone last semester, and so someone else was Secretary General, but I came back as Secretary General. All of the other officers are new, and they all started last semester, so I don't know any of them. And so I was walking in there, these people didn't know me, and I was like, well, I'm your president, and so I had to find a way to make them comfortable with me and make them like, because obviously, like, if I was them, I'd be like, who's this girl? Like, what? She doesn't know what she's doing. Like, I don't know her. Like, why should I listen to her? And so building that like trust and that faith in each other, and then also building them up since I'm about to leave, and this is all of their first semesters as officers, I have to prepare them for what's ahead to make sure that Model UN is in good hands in the future. And so this really challenged my leadership abilities in developing other people and making it about them and not about me and my leadership. A big part of this is we're hosting our Model UN conference in the fall, so I have to make sure that they're ready for that and prepared for that. Then I also continued serving as vice president of the GIA. Again, we post meetings every week. We have no pictures, but yeah. And then I also got really back into photography. So I took pictures for selection for TEDx. If you were here for Tejas' presentation, whenever me and my friends would hang out, sometimes I'd whip out my camera and I'd be like, we're taking pictures together because we don't have much time left. And then also just when I'm hanging out with my friends, and then I'm also taking a bunch of people's graduation pics. So We also went back to Texas Model UN, so this is my 4th time going to this conference, and I represented Mexico on the Security Council, and we discussed the situation in Somalia and the impact of climate-related disasters on international peace and security. We developed a couple of resolutions, and this was my 4th time in a row winning the Distinguished Delegation Award, so I was able to accomplish a 4-peat, which I was really happy about. And this was my first conference with a bunch of the younger officers, and it was a lot of them, it was only their 2nd conference, and so I was able to kind of encourage them and help them with any questions they had. This was also really cool because my first Texas Model UN conference, my freshman year, I sat next to this delegation and we were just talking and they told me that they were freshmen in high school. And I was like, you're freshmen in high school at a college Model UN conference. I was like, you're crazy. They were super nervous. And it was only my 2nd conference, but it was their first college conference. So I was like, you guys are gonna do great. I was helping them out and they were absolutely amazing. They were like some of the best delegates there. It was super impressive. And so they were from Lubbock. And so we like followed each other on Instagram. And then every time for the past 2 years, this was all virtual. Whenever we'd see each other, we'd be like, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you here. And I was like, I'm glad you guys are still coming and still competing. This year I walked into the Security Council room and my chair is one of the people that I met. So now he's a 1st-year undergrad at Georgetown University, which is where I want to go to grad school. And so it was kind of really crazy to go full circle and see that these like high schoolers be able to like come around and like my last conference, I was being chaired by someone that like I helped in my first conference, which it was really cool. TEDx with Tejas, it was an amazing event and I was super happy to be able to take pictures and kind of photograph some of the memories. These are some of my favorite. And on the right, I helped Madeline a little bit with the Idea Lab. And so this is a graphic that I made that I was really, really proud of. And yeah. And then these are just some fun memories from Day of Service. And then in the middle, top middle, so technically it was my last official conference, but then a couple of weeks ago we had a mock International Atomic Energy Association conference where we discussed the danger of nuclear power plants in Ukraine that are on the front lines of war. And that is so Julia, me and her have been officers of Model UN the entire time. And this was actually the only conference where we were actually delegates together. And she was Russia and I was the US. So we had a really fun time with that. And these are just some fun memories with some of my friends that I've either like gotten closer with or maintained friendships with. And I've been super grateful for that. So what's up next? Like a couple days after graduation, I'll be going to Europe. I'll be traveling to France, Italy, and Greece with some of my friends from my internships for like a little bit over a month. I'm really excited about that. And about August, I'll be starting full-time at the DoD. I'll be doing the Intelligence Analysis Development Program, which is like a 5-year program where they train me different kinds of analysis, and I'm able to work with different topics. Super excited about that. And then hopefully it will depend on like funding from the government, basically. I'm going to be looking into grad school in DC. I'm hoping to go to Georgetown, but yes. So my reflection, I'll try to move faster. So I'm not one to do statistics too much, but some cool numbers that I found. So I went to 9 just Model UN conferences. I did 6 competitions and I won 12 awards. A cool one that I didn't talk about, I actually got Boren, which is, if you don't know what it is, it's like a State Department funded scholarship where like in the summer you take language classes and then in the fall you like go to that country and you immerse yourself for the whole time. And so I got the Turkish flagship initiative and I kind of applied on a whim because at the time I wanted to do counterterrorism and so I wanted to learn Turkish. And then I applied not thinking I would get it, and then I got alternate status. Then I got declined from Archer, and the same week then Boren was like, you got in. And so it was a roller coaster of emotions. I did end up declining to do my government internships, but it was really a testament to me that I was like, oh, like I can win these very competitive awards, which I had no idea that I could. Some lessons. It's really hard in a program like Top Scholar because you're surrounded by so many amazing people doing so many amazing things, and sometimes you're like, what am I doing? You know, and like you lose so much perspective sometimes whenever you're seeing people do stuff and you're like, well, I'm not doing anything. But then like when I made this presentation, I was like, oh, I did a couple things, like I did a thing or two. But I had to learn that like progress is different for everyone. It's not linear. And just because someone else seems like they're doing more, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not doing enough. You have to define that for yourself and discover that for yourself. Whether it was through my study abroad or getting declined from certain opportunities or just working through personal difficulties, I became a much more adaptable and tenacious person. I've become much more flexible in unknown circumstances, and I'm able to work through them, put my nose to the ground and get through it. And I think the biggest thing is I'm a much more confident person than I was when I came in. I wasn't unconfident, but I wasn't nearly as confident as I am now. And so now I know my abilities, I know who I am, and I know what I want, and I'm able to embrace that and be able to work for it. And that's been a really big deal for me. So what's my legacy? So this one on the left, if you ever hear a top scholar say, that's crazy, that's me. I did that. I didn't realize I said this very often, but I do, or I just say that's crazy a lot. Prime example is in Tejas's closing speech for his TEDx, he said it in his speech. So that's my biggest legacy, maybe. I would also like to think that in Model UN and GIA, the leadership I've had building up other leaders and trying to create sustainability for those organizations in the future, like GIA, me and Grace were like Grace more so than me, but like we worked together to kind of reorganize GIA better because it was kind of a mess before we got there. Millennium Fellowship, I was part of the founding cohort and it still exists today. So I'm pretty proud of that. And then finally my Spotify playlists, because funny story, when I was in Korea, oh, you can scan it and that's my favorite one. It's called Movie Vibes. It's an indie mix. It's really good. When I was in Korea, sometimes I would be listening to my Spotify and all of a sudden it would stop playing on my device and it would show a totally different song, but I couldn't play it. And for the longest time, I was like, what the heck? And then I realized that my Spotify was still logged in on the TV in the dorm and they were all playing my music. Whenever I wasn't there, they were using my Spotify. And so then I created like a bunch of songs called Kathryn, so they would get the message and then they're like, okay, we'll stop using it. Still use my songs, but just not my Spotify account. So that's a little fun legacy that I have. So high school me would be proud. So this is me before this is like my graduation pics, and on the right, that's me in Korea. And that's me drinking cast beer, which is really awful beer. I just had one, but it's really bad. But to me, I just think that high school senior me would never picture all the things that I've done. I didn't know that I was capable of doing them. Before I got into Top Scholar, I thought I was smart, but I didn't think I was that smart or that capable or that different because I went to a huge high school, so everyone was doing crazy things. So I was like, okay, that's like I was like, I'm not doing that. Like I'm not in the top 10 people. Like I got like a 2 on my AP physics exam. I was really bad at physics, broke me down. But when I look at me now, I know that past me would be proud of me, and current me is super proud of everything that I've done and everything that I've accomplished, and how far that I've come. So I want to say thank you to everyone coming out. Thank you to all of my friends, the Top Scholar program and the Top Scholar staff for your support, and especially my faculty mentors. Without you guys, without your belief in me and pushing me, I wouldn't be where I am today. So thank you.
Great job, Kathryn. It's been a true joy to get to know you over the last 4 years and see your growth and the confidence and just your overall, kind of coming together and growing into your own skin, as I often put it. My question for you is about the experiences that you've had kind of outside of academics and outside of the classroom, and how you think that informs your ability to be a better professional in the intelligence world.
Like my conferences and competitions and stuff, those are like absolutely pivotal. So I actually just learned, okay, so in an academic setting, we learned about the importance of like role playing and like simulations and things and what that forms. And so when you just learn things from like an academic perspective, you're just like, oh, well, this is an easy solution. Like, why don't they just do this? But then when you actually are the one creating the policy and negotiating the policy, defending it, you realize there's so many considerations that like, when you're just a student, you don't always think of them. And then you're like, oh, so like, this might be why this policy wouldn't actually work. And so it kind of challenges you to apply everything that you learn in an academic setting to the real world and think of solutions that like, because like in Model UN, these conferences, they're like, okay, solve climate change. And you're like, if the diplomats in the actual United Nations can't solve it, how can I? But you try. And that's it pushes you, it challenges you. And it's made me be able to think critically a lot more and just be confident in being able to negotiate and stand up for my ideas, but then also learn from others. So it's if you're interested in policy at all, I highly recommend going to a policy conference where you have to create one, because that totally changes your viewpoint on things.
And what about things like the high ropes retreat or, the things that maybe didn't seem to have any connection to academics?
I mean, it's just like fostering a sense of community was like the biggest thing in that. And then I guess like for the high ropes one, it's like taking risks and being okay to be scared and like the one picture. The one picture, I'm doing like a 30-foot free fall and there's like no tension in the rope and it hurt a little bit, but it was also like really fun. And so, yeah, that one, that's me falling. And just like things like that, like being able to take a leap of faith and do something super scary and like know that you're gonna end up being okay because you have something to catch you. And then also just like working with other people and having that community with them. Super cool, and I highly recommend as top scholars to go to that retreat because it's a lot of fun.
So comments, thoughts, questions from others in the room, starting with the faculty and staff?
Just.
Okay.
That's okay,
No,
sorry.
okay.
One thing that comes across is I really admire your self-awareness. You recognize who you were back as a freshman, you recognize where you are now. You've done a great job of highlighting how things have changed you, not just what you've learned. Obviously, your head is more full of knowledge, but I greatly admire your ability to kind of see your role. I think it's impressive how you put yourself in the arena. To maybe use an overused quote, you didn't just take the classes and coast through college. You actually engaged and got some real traction, and I think that's accelerated you as you prepare to leave and prepare to go. Question: have you given thought to making the transition from the cocoon of the university to real life? To again be too cliche, but you're entering a very large, very rigid bureaucracy. As opposed to being in sort of the freewheeling, free thinking, flexible, and the model UN will end in a week, but you're going to be going back to work every day. And I don't mean to be to challenge you, but I mean I imagine you've given that some thought, and so I'd be curious to know how you think you're going to manage that transition.
Yeah, I'm part of it that makes me feel more comfortable, I guess, is since I've had those 2 internships, I kind of know what the day-to-day life might look like. And I also have friends that are in the program that I'm going to be in. So like talking to them, getting advice from them, and just being able to be flexible. And I know it'll definitely be a change because you're going to work every single day for the rest of my life. That's cool.
You'll also be getting paid for it.
Yeah, more than anything though, I'm excited for the challenge. And I just try to keep a perspective of excitement while also like manage expectations, because I know it's not gonna, like, as an intern, I think I get a lot more like flexibility and like opportunity that I will as like a full-time employee, because there's like more they know you there for the long haul, so like you have to like work through things a little bit more. But that being said, like I think it'll be different, it'll be a challenge, but I'm more excited to see like how I will grow from that and see where that will take me and how I can sometimes challenge the rigidity and then sometimes learn from it as well.
Good. I'm always a phone call or an email. I need help.
Of course, and thank you for all of your assistance. I didn't mention it in here, there's a lot of things, but we have been working on a paper that I'm trying to publish. We'll see if it gets there, on how the withdrawal from Afghanistan is related to our withdrawal from Vietnam, and how that can impact our credibility specifically in the Asia Pacific and with competition with China. Sounds very convoluted, but it's clearer in the paper.
So what could we have done better for you?
Oh, nothing.
Okay, and what's one course you wish we could offer that we didn't offer? Those are 2 different questions.
Don't need hard ones. You're supposed to compliment me for kidding.
Okay, you did wonderfully. And you
Okay.
the time you got a 95 on a paper and you were so mad.
I wasn't mad. I said, what do I need to do to get a 100? And you were like, are you upset with your 95? And I was like, no, but I want to know how to improve. And then I got,
So now he's turned that question around back to you.
Yeah.
yeah, no. It's full circle. I think for me, sometimes, this is gonna sound maybe a little bit arrogant, but a little bit more challenge with some classes, because whenever you're teaching, you have to teach to a wide variety of people, especially like in GLA, because like there's not like a strict like progression, and so there's people that don't know a lot and then people that do. And so sometimes I think I don't know how you would do it, but like more challenge in the classroom that would like I mean I find it like outside the classroom a lot of the time, but like push me to achieve more, not that do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I know
Like just
no, I know exactly what you're trying to say, and I was kind of thinking that's what you would say, so I totally agree. We need to, I think we need some structured and some unstructured ways to do better.
Yeah.
So,
and for class.
It's just for program planning purposes, so it's not,
Yeah,
nothing
yeah.
personal.
I'm trying to think,
well, okay, let me rephrase it. What piece do you wish you had a better, in all the skill sets and understandings and appreciation and learning experience, was there a gap, or was there an area that you wish you could have spent more time?
I think more time, it's something that I got when I went to Korea, but looking at international relations from a non-US perspective, because a lot of the time in our courses, the literature that we're reading is all from writers in the US. Whenever we're looking at things, for the most part, a lot of the time we're considering them from like a US perspective. And so being able to, maybe within classes or having a class specifically where like you look at like Asian literature, like literature from Africa and things like that, just like so that you could see things from how they're viewing the world. Because as like going into intelligence, like if I'm looking at things just from a US perspective, I'm gonna get it wrong. Because if I'm trying to predict how China's gonna make their next move, but I don't know how China is thinking, and I expect them to react the same way that the US is, you're gonna get it wrong. So I think maybe incorporating that a little bit more.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that was an amazing presentation that I'm sure that the detail really is overwhelming indeed. So congratulations on really a journey, a global journey at UTSA. So I think I shouldn't sound too confident, but your presentation made me think that actually UTSA did a really good job for the global content and the global experience of education that we want to provide to all students. So I know it's not easy, but you demonstrate it's doable. You can do it, surviving and flourishing on the difficult circumstances that the pandemic brought on us, on really capturing what other cultures can give to your personal growth and development, and bringing it here to your friends, peers, to UTSA. So that's really a major accomplishment, and we're all very proud of you.
Thank you.
But again, about teaching, something about teaching, as that makes us feel good as instructors here. One thing I want to ask you, very often people from practice, from the policy world, come to UTSA and really love it here because there is so much to share, and GLA, the Global Affairs Program, prides itself on being very much focused on building careers, on building expertise, and building, policy knowledge. So academia should never stay too removed from that, and we often are. So if you come to campus, and I hope you will, even virtually one day, what course would you teach?
Oh,
So that we have it.
So in my class with Dr. Hofferberg, it's one of my honors seminars that I'm taking. We had to do like an expert lead session. So like we basically taught a class. And one thing that and this is related to what I just said, but it's international relations from a non-Western perspective. So I explored, it's called the Chinese School of International Relations, and then how Africa as a continent basically is approaching international relations, and how Latin America is. And so I think that because there's so much to learn and explore in those, and so I think I did it in 2 hours, but there was a lot more that you could do. So I would maybe want to attempt to do that and show like how international relations is, because it's a very Eurocentric field of study. A lot of the old studies were made in Europe and from a European perspective, and if even whenever they consider other regions, it's a European scholar that we're usually learning from. And so elevating those voices and learning from them would be something that I'd like to teach on. Thank
Can I circle back?
you. Yeah.
Honest to goodness. I don't think any of us are in this for the money or for anything. Except for the satisfaction of seeing people grow. And I do want you to know that it's students like you that keeps me coming back. And I'm sure it keeps many other faculty members coming back because we know what we wish we could teach, and then you regularly exceed the expectations. And so thank you for doing that and keeping at least me coming back.
Thank you. I really
Future
hope
students may regret that, but
no one regrets that. I promise you. I really appreciate that. And then all of you have had a tremendous impact on my growth and in making sure that I am still being challenged in your courses. And it's been amazing learning from you all and from your expertise and experience. Again, like I said, I wouldn't be where I am without you guys. So
Kathryn, will you go ahead and stop share? There are a couple of comments on here, and we have about 5 more minutes for folks to make comments, and then let you kind of read them for yourself. You may have to go up a little bit since we have the while she's kind of doing that quick review, any comments from folks in the room?
Yes.
I love you. You are literally pushing me to do the best I can. I mean, our interests are very kind of aligned, but we're going different paths for it, which I'm really grateful to see your perspective. You've taught me how to deal with biases, how to be a better leader, how to be a better friend. Whether we're doing late night wine night, doing socials together, doing whatever, like randomly going like country dancing on a Wednesday. It's just been so much fun getting to know you and grow closer to you. And it's not even a goodbye anymore, just because I'm just following you back to the DC area. But yeah, I know you really can't, but I'm just really grateful for your friendship. I'm excited to continue to grow with you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for teaching me about cyber stuff as much as you can.
We go to Dylan for that. Not me.
Just like thank you for being such a good roommate and such a good friend. You really are like such a force in your field, and just truly shows what like someone with your kind of like head on your shoulders and your passion, like what you can accomplish. And I no doubt you'll make the world a better place and just be super good at whatever you do. Yeah, I hope our paths cross again and soon.
Yeah. I'll come to Sweden, don't worry.
It's crazy, by the way. Thank you for, let me start saying that, thank you for letting me get to know you for the past, I wish we would have been friends sooner. But it is always amazing hearing how informed you are in a bunch of different issues. So we'll spend like an hour or two talking about semiconductors that randomly just popped up in conversation about Taiwan, and then moving here, and we get into that, and then we start getting into border issues. We start getting into like talking, because I'm from the Valley and you starting to take a class, and it's great, having someone to have that intellectual conversation back and forth with. And it's amazing to see how you're informed on most everything, it feels like. And the fact that you make the effort to do that, you make the effort to do the research and almost on a lot of those different topics, it's great. You're gonna kill it wherever you go.
I appreciate that. And I wish we became friends sooner, but I'm happy that we have time really now.
Say something. Thank you for just everything and being a great friend over the past 3-4 years. Some of my favorite memories of college are like hanging out with you and Edgar our sophomore year until the all crazy hours of the night. And so excited to hopefully, fingers crossed, be able to move up to DC with both you and Grace. But you're one of the most knowledgeable people I know in so many different areas. And so it's been awesome getting to know you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Kathryn, don't forget us here at UTSA. Don't forget the Top Scholar Program and the future GLA and internationally minded students that are gonna come over. We have about 10 minutes until our next